Okay, so this is my second video on conversions, and this is going to be more conversions. So we are now going to convert fractions to percents, and the first thing that we have to do is convert the fraction to a decimal, and then we'll take the decimal and convert that to the percent. Okay, so to do these conversions, we first have to divide the numerator, the 7, by the 20 in this case, by the denominator. So it's 7 divided by 20, which gives us the decimal number 35, which is equivalent to that original fraction. And then we simply write that in percent form, so it will be 35%. On the second one, we're going to take the 5 divided by 2. Remember, we start at the top, the numerator divided by the denominator, top to bottom. So 5 divided by 2 is 2.5. And then we move the decimal 2 places to the right and put our percent symbol on there. So it is 250%. All right. Next, we're going to convert the fraction 5/8. So we simply take 5 divided by 8. If I should go too fast for you, remember the pause, right? You can always pause. 5 divided by 8, you may want to pick up your calculator and try this, right? So 5 divided by 8 is 0.625. And then as a percent, we're going to move the decimal 2 places to the right. Remember, that's the same as multiplying that by 100. So that would be 62.5%. Okay. All right, so rounding percents. Now, in this class, we feel like you probably already know how to round. That may or may not be true, and I did put a couple of problems on Connect from Chapter 1. So if you feel like you're a little deficient on rounding, you can always go back to Chapter 1. You can always ask me questions. I'll be glad to help you with that. Okay, so rounding is something that you're going to get a lot of in this class, so you definitely want to get good at that. Okay, so we're going to take the 4 and divide it by 9. And when I do that, what happens is I'll see 4s going all the way across the screen of my calculator. And remember, you guys want to get the BA2 Plus financial calculator. That's what we're going to use in this class. And you actually want to make sure that you set it on 9 decimal places. So I guess I need to mention that actually right now, because if you're using that, you might get very frustrated whenever it's on 2 decimal places. And actually, you needed that back maybe, let's see, back on some of these too. So make sure that you set your calculator to 9 decimal places, and the way you do that is you hit the second key, and then format is on the decimal. So hit second decimal, and that puts it into the format mode. Type in a 9 and then push enter. And that way you'll be able to see all of the decimals that you need to see on your calculator so that you can do your own rounding and that you don't have problems with that. And so I'll have to be sure and put a note about that in this first lesson. Okay, so when you take 4 divided by 9, it is a repeating 4. And we can write repeating numbers with a bar over the part that repeats. In this case, it's just the 4. Now notice it says that we want to round this to the nearest 10th percent and 100th percent. And it tells you how to do that up here, right? You first of all, you're going to identify where you're rounding to, and then if it's 5 or more to the right of that, you will add 1 to that digit, and if it's not, then you'll just drop the digits to the right. So first, to be able to do that, we just have to write this out. 0.444444. I'm going to write a bunch of them because we're rounding this to the tenths and to the hundredths, so we're going to need that. So in percent form, that would be 44.444, but that's not rounded, right? So, well, it's not rounded to the tenths or the hundredths. It is actually rounded. So if we want to round to the tenths, we're going to look at the decimal right to the first place to the right of the decimal. This is a 4. So to the nearest tenth, it's going to be 44.4%. And then to the hundredths, we have to go one place more to the right, right? So for the hundredths, then I'm going to be looking at this place value and what's to the right of that, which is still a 4 since we had a repeating 4. And so it's 44.44% to the nearest hundredth percent, right? So you want to put it in percent form before you round, and that will make that go much smoother if you do that. Okay, so on the next one, we're going to have, I'm going to go to the right of this one, 7 divided by 11. And this one's also repeating. It's a repeating 6-3. So it has 2 digits that are repeating. And so once again, we want to write this out. So that's 0.63636. I have to do 5 digits, and that's because of the rounding to the hundredths once I put it in percent form. Okay, so in percent form, then it's going to be 63.636%. And then I'm going to round that to the tenths and the hundredths, right? So to the tenths place, right, that's 6 after the decimals in the tenths place, so I'm going to have 63.6%. And then for the hundredths place, I'm going to move that 1 digit over, right? So that's the hundredths, right? It's tenths, hundredths, thousandths, and so on. And I'm going to look at that digit, which tells me I have to add 1. So when I round this to the hundredths place, it's going to be 63.64%. And one of the main things here is just making sure that you do actually put this in percent form before you try to do your rounding. Okay. And, oh gosh, just a second. So I'm so thankful for that pause part of my recording. There's some weird glitchy stuff that goes on sometimes, and I just have to work around it because I don't know what else to do. Okay, so let's finish this portion of the lesson. We're going to take the 5 and divide that by 13. If only I could get that to erase. Let me try that again. So 5 divided by 13. And then we're going to write out enough digits so that we can get this rounded. Because remember, I'm going to be moving the decimal 2 places to the right. So I need 5 places to get all my rounding done. So it's going to be 38.461%, and that's before rounding. And when I round that to the tenths place, I'm going to add 1. So 38.5%. And then, here, I'll just write it out again. 38.461% rounded to the hundredths place means that I don't add anything. I just drop what's after that. So 38.46%. Excuse me. And then we have 7 divided by 16 to convert this first to the decimal. Now this one does not have any decimals past that. So we just write out what we have, and notice it said as needed, right? Well, in this case, we're going to round for the tenths, but we won't have to round for the hundredths because it'll just stay like it is. So now we're going to write this as 43.75%. And then for the tenths rounding it to the nearest 1/10%, right, it's going to be 43.8% because we do have to add one there. But to the hundredths, it's going to stay the same because it actually was already written out, right, to the hundredths place, the nearest 100th%. All right. Well, that's the end of this lesson. Be sure to practice from your textbook or using Connect. I have a practice set up for every chapter on Connect, and so there's plenty of places to practice all of these concepts. Whoops, might need to pause.